You've got such an interesting perspective, Greg, having spent a number of years in and around tracks and circuits, and maybe give us your perspective on how Miami has changed, and maybe how the United States has changed generally from an F1 perspective.
Well, back when Watkins Glen, they had the race. It was an incredibly popular event, but it was obviously in an area back then, especially, that was really short on hotel rooms and all of that.
All the infrastructure.
Like everything, it's not much there, even today.
And that was a huge circus they came in. How many years did they run there? It was like 10 years?
10 at least, yeah. And it was great, but it just didn't, there were really devout fans, but there were also a lot of people that came out just for the party, right? And, then Formula One sort of eased a little bit in popularity, and then Drive to Survive started on Netflix. And it happened during the pandemic, when people couldn't go out, couldn't do anything, and they'd be looking for something to watch, and they'd click on Drive to Survive. And here you're getting these inside stories on these pilots, really, that are just wielding these incredibly fast cars in these really tight, tough circuits, and what they dealt with, what they go through, and the popularity blew up.
The curtain was unveiled, really, is what it is. You could look behind the curtain. Interesting thing for me is that through the years, through the last number of years now, what we've really seen is the demographic has changed around this sport. I mean, I've talked on this program before. I was 10 years old, streets of Detroit, 1981 or so, hanging onto a fence with a $5 ticket. Those who were around me in Detroit, the other fans, right, were
buy a $5 soda now.
Right, right. But they were all South Americans or Europeans because it was affordable to go to Detroit to see a Formula One race. But there weren't Americans around us. I mean, there were some curious Americans, but there was not an energy around a 22-year-old or a college-age female fan who wanted to see Lando up close and personal. I mean, that's the part that
it could have been very likely that those Americans were actually Canadians.
Well,
because they were in Detroit. They've always been huge.
No, that's exactly who they were.
Part of what Drive to Survive did was it removed the helmet.
Yeah.
I mean, it gave us that personal touch to the drivers. If you were a hardcore fan, you saw it because you watched the race, you watched you watched the interviews. If you were a casual fan, you watched an ESPN highlight, you never saw the driver out of the helmet. Yeah. So I think the removal of the helmet, the introduction of the drama, is what really drove that perfect storm. But I think you guys cued on to something else that's interesting, and I think maybe Formula One is riding a little bit of the wave that we're riding. When we last spoke, we talked about what made our country club, Motorsport Country Club, unique compared to the others, and it's proximity to the city. When you talk about Watkins Glen, I remember what it took to drive to Watkins Glen. So the partiers went, the hardcore went. And I think you still have a little bit of that with more of the traditional tracks on these racetracks all around the world. But here in Miami, we have, much like we have at the club, a lot of casual social attendees. And now, being that it's year 4, I think they've become fans. We did have people who came to year 1 who didn't watch Netflix, who were just here because it was the coolest thing in town this weekend.
Right.
But now they kind of got hooked, and the Lando win last year, the storylines. Yeah. That Lando win last year is one of those storylines, and I think it's also so easy, the proximity to get to the Hard Rock Stadium from anywhere downtown is just so easy compared to getting to a Watkins Glen or where I've not been. It's on my bucket list. What I've heard about getting to Silverstone, I've heard is an absolute
nightmare
challenge.
Yeah. And the interesting thing too is that when you're driving a 95 and you get within 3 weeks of this event, you see the track being built, and you drive by it, and I think people drive by and go, "Wow, what's going on there?" And that's generated interest. But getting back to what you're saying, I announced, I think it was the first 4 Formula One races at COTA, right, for the track, and the first year it was blown out.
Yeah.
In terms of every year after that, it just started to drop and drop and drop, and because it was the hardcore people, you had people from around the world came and everything, but then that started to ease. And again, I keep getting back to Drive to Survive and COVID, when people had nothing else to do. And ever since that, that's why now we're the only country that have 3 Formula One events.
And 5 in North America.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And when you talk about COTA and the relationship to the Netflix launch of the series, COTA was almost dead, Greg. I mean, COTA, when it rained and flooded the one year.
I announced that one. It was
nuts. And they had written Austin off prior to COVID, prior to the Netflix series being announced. and to see the resurgence now and the record crowds, and not just there, but here, and also in obviously Las Vegas and the property that's been developed there. It's a resurgence that the sport hasn't seen since the 60s, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps even eclipsing all of that. I was at the F1 Academy premiere last night, and to see those under 25 years old, female, in the crowd when they open it up to everybody, anybody can go and watch if you bought a ticket. The screaming, the adulation, the appreciation for Susie Wolf from the crowd.
Yep.
She's a rock star in her own way.
Yeah.
You know,
A true passion.
A true passion around all of it.